held there, and was the result of Huirai's peculiar notions of the hospitalities due a white man. I told him that I was not accustomed to dining in churches at home, even on Sunday, and furthermore, that I liked companionship at table. But he was not convinced, and he refused to join me. He and his family had already eaten, he said, so I sat on a box at the pulpit table, partaking in a solitary meal, and got through it as quickly as possible. I smiled inwardly at the thought of the inheritance of prestige granted me without question at Retiaro, merely because I was the sole representative there of a so-called superior race. No white wasters had preceded me to the atoll. This was fortunate in a way, for it gave me something to live up to, the ideal Retiarian conception of the Papapa white man. Huirai was partially responsible for the fact that it was ideal. His tales of San Francisco, which to the Paumotuan means America, had been steadily growing in splendor. He seemed to have forgotten whatever he may have seen there of misery or incompetence or ugliness. All Americans were divinities of a sort. Their energy was superhuman. Their accomplishment, as exemplified in ships, trains, buildings, automobiles, moving picture theaters, beyond all belief unless one had actually seen those things. And the meanest of them lived on a scale of grandeur far surpassing that of the governor of the Paumotuans at Fakavava. Yes, I had something to live up to at Retiaro. The necessity was flattering, to be sure, but it cost some effort and inconvenience to meet it. I didn't dare look as slack as I often felt, both mentally and physically. I could not even sit on the floor or stretch out at my ease when in a native house, and I was compelled, when eating, to resume the use of my two-pronged fork and the small tin spoon, although it was much simpler and easier to eat with my fingers, as the rest of them did. Having finished my meal, I took what comfort prestige permitted by placing my box by the wall and leaning back against a post. Takiero, a woman of barbaric beauty, was sitting near by playing Conquer the North on my ocarina. I taught her the air in an unguarded moment and had been regretting it ever since. Hunga, her husband, lay at her side, his strong, fine limbs relaxed in sleep. I would have given all my gratuitous prestige as a popra to have exchanged legs or shoulders or girth of chest with him. It was at about this time, as I remember it, that my thoughts turned to the subject of feeding parents. Nui Vahine was present, still or again, nursing the 3-month-old baby. It belonged, as I knew, to Takiero, who appeared to be quite capable of nourishing it herself. Why had she given it to Nui Vahine? And why had Hunga, the father of the child, consented to this seemingly unnatural gift? The transfer of parenthood had been made a month earlier, since which time Takiero and her husband had shown only a slight proprietary interest in their offspring. Takiero sometimes dandled it on her knees, as any woman might the child of someone else, but no one would have guessed that she was the mother of it. Nui Vahine fed, clothed, and bathed it, and her husband, Nui Tane, was as fond of it as she herself. They kept the child at their house, and between them made as much fuss over it as though it were their own flesh and blood. What could have been the origin of this strange practice of parenthood by proxy? It was a common one throughout eastern Polynesia. I had seen a good many instances of it in the Cook Islands, the Marquesas, and the Society Group. Here was a subject worthy of an important chapter in the Life and Character monograph, and I decided I might as well begin my researches at once. Takiero reluctantly left off her playing and placed herself in a receptive mood. Why, I asked, had she given her child to Nui Vahine? Her reply was, because Nui Vahine had asked for it. "But see here, Takiero," I said, "I should think that you and Hunga would want to keep your own baby?" "It is none of my business, of course. I ask you only because I would like to get some information on this feeding parent custom. Can't you feed it yourself? Is that the reason you gave it away?" I blundered atrociously in asking that question without meaning to. I touched her pride as a woman, as a mother. Takeo looked at me for a moment without speaking. Then she tore open her dress and gave me absolute proof, not that I wanted it, of her ability to nurse her own or any other child. Following this, she went over to where Nui Vane was sitting, snatched the baby from her arms, and almost smothered it against her body. She fondled it, kissed it, covered it with her magnificent hair. I had never before seen such a display of savage and tender maternal passion. By that time Nui Vane had recovered from her astonishment and came to defense of her own. Her month of motherhood gave her claims to the child, apparently, and she tried to enforce them physically. Takeo stood her ground, her black eyes flaming, and, holding the baby in one arm, pushed Nui Vane away with the other. I expected to see hair flying, but luckily both women found their tongues at the same moment. They were, in fact, two superb cats spitting at each other. The torrent of words did not flow smoothly. It came in hot, short bursts, like salvos of machine-gun fire. And, curiously enough, it was almost pure Paumotuan, not the hybrid Paumotuan Tahitian commonly used in their temperate speech. It bristled with snarling ngs, with flint-like k's, from which fire could be struck in passionate argument. Other women took sides in the quarrel, and I poked an inquisitive pencil into a wasp's nest. The effect could hardly have been more disconcerting. Hunga was awakened by the angry voices and looked on with sleepy perplexity. Nui Vane grinned reassuringly, as much to say, "Don't be upset. You know what women are." Finally Faery, the chief, who had been an impassive spectator, bellowed out a command for silence. The tumult subsided at once, and the fury of the women with it. 5 minutes later everything was as had been before. Hunga was sleeping, and Nui Vane polishing a pearl-shelled fish-hook. Nui Vahine had the baby, and Takeo the ocarina. Neither of them showed the least resentment, either toward me or toward each other. In intensity and briefness, the gusts of passion which swept through the little church was precisely like the squalls of wind and rain which darken the seas of the low archipelago in the midst of the hurricane season, which burst almost from a clear sky, and then as suddenly melt into pure sunlight again. When I left the village to return to Soul Eater's Island, Takeo was still playing the old border ballad on my ocarina. It had once been my favorite air for that instrument. I first heard it in northern France on a blustering winter evening when a brigade of English regiments was marching under heavy shell fire into one of the greatest battles of the war, to the music of pipes and drums. Humming the air now, although I still feel a tightening of the nerves, a quickening of the pulses, it is not because of the old set of associations. They have been buried forever beneath a newer set. The village at Retiaro comes into view, and I see Takeo clutching a baby against her naked breast, standing in the midst of a crowd of turbulent women. Should there be some other Polynesian scholar who wishes to pursue further an inquiry into a curious practice of child adoption, I would advise extreme caution at an atoll far on the southeasterly fringe of the low archipelago. The place may easily be identified, for he will find there a young woman of barbaric beauty, who will be playing Conquer the North on an ocarina. End of Chapter 9.